Let's start with Minnesota. Let's start with NBC. What? NBC breaks down the ICE shooting in Minnesota. Normally, I would not say let's go to NBC, but they actually did it fairly. So here they are breaking down what happened in Minnesota in the ICE incident yesterday. Listen.
Stuff we were learning from the get-go. Again, the police chief saying this vehicle was blocking the federal agents right there.
That's right, Tom. And a big caveat, we don't know what happened before this, but they're definitely going to look at the fact this is an unmarked vehicle, but the lights are on. These are clearly members of law enforcement. So that's at least known to this driver.
Let's play the video because something else happens right here. Those officers approach the vehicle. They try to open the door. Let's stop it here. How will this help the investigators?
Whatever is said here, what these officers say, if the driver said anything or not, could really help them understand whether or not they thought there was some sort of an imminent threat. Was this person trying to listen to them? Were they scared? Or is this going to be a problem?
And then, of course, what the driver does next. Let's play that video. Trying to leave there. One of the officers felt like they were forced to fire, and they do. We want to show another angle, reverse angle of the same incident here. We're going to freeze it. This is that same angle here. And what does this show us, Tom?
Well, this appears to show an officer right in front of the vehicle. That, and between the way that the vehicle was moving and the timeline of that, how was the officer responding in that split second going to be critical for investigators.
Finally, one more piece of evidence we want to talk about here, and it is the bullet hole in the front of the windshield. What will this tell investigators?
Well, you look at this, you look at ballistics, you look at witness statements, you look at other video, all going to be part of this investigation. But, Tom, it's going to take some time.
Okay, that's basically what happened. That's what happened yesterday. Now, it's not why it happened, but it is what happened. Why did this happen? Well, let me give you one scenario. One of the ICE agents, one of the agents involved, somebody had already tried to ram their car into him at another incident. Tried to run him over because he's one of them damn ICE people. So if somebody's tried to run me over once before, and I'm in exactly the same kind of situation, I don't know. I think I tend to generally think, oh, dear God, it's happening again, especially if it's in a split second. Okay? There's number one. Number two, if I'm an ICE officer and I have the mayor, the governor, and everyone else, I'm going to get to this here in just a second. I think you're going to love the National Guard comments that I have. If you have all of these forces making you into the villain, you are on knife's edge every time you go out to do your job. Knife's edge. You are razor sharp and, quite honestly, would be much more likely to defend yourself than you would be if everybody was cool. You'd see an isolated incident, somebody might come up, but you'd be like, okay, relax, everybody. But because everything has been ratcheted up to ICE is the evil ICE, these guys are on edge. And they should be, because they're constantly under attack, as are their families. Okay. Why are they? Why are they constantly under attack? Why? Let me give you a couple of things. First, let me play cut two. This is Mayor Frey. Right after the shooting, here's what he said.
But I do have a message for our community, for our city, and I have a message for ICE. To ICE, get the out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite.
Okay. Now, can I ask you, what else is going on in Minneapolis? They're going into the Somali community. Why Somali? Somali. Is that in other news? Oh, yes, that's right. The biggest scandal of the state and possibly the biggest heist of taxpayer money in the history of our country is going on in the Somali community. Who are the most likely? Tim Walz said some white people better go to jail. Oh, I know two white people that probably will go to jail. The governor and the mayor. So do they have any incentive at all to make the federal government into the bad guy? Absolutely. Beyond just the fact that that's what Democrats do, I guess, now, is you just make the federal government. I thought we were the ones that hated the federal government. No. We've never hated the federal government. We hate the federal government out of control. We hate the federal government when it is being unconstitutional. We do not hate the federal government. Anarchists, communists, people who are trying to actively overthrow our government by causing chaos in our streets, they hate the federal government. To me, that sounds like Democratic Socialists of America. Sounds like the people who are really in charge. Not necessarily the voters, but the people who actually have been duped and believe that the Democrats actually care about the Constitution and are not trying to overthrow things. So, Tim Walz comes out after saying, get the F out of the city from the mayor. The governor comes out, and the government makes a statement saying that we do not need any further help from the federal government. To Donald Trump and Kristi Noem, you've done enough. There's nothing more important than Minnesotans' safety. I have issued a warning order to prepare the Minnesota National Guard. We have soldiers in training and prepared to be deployed if necessary. I remind you, a warning order is a heads up for folks. A heads up for who? A heads up for who? There is no other way to read this other than I am training our National Guard to stand up against our federal government. Gang, this is the beginning of a civil war unless everybody remains calm and does the constitutional thing. So when this happened yesterday, I wanted to reach out to some friends who, know the Constitution and ask them, how does the National Guard actually work? A governor cannot block the Department of Justice in any criminal investigation. The governor cannot block the Department of Homeland Security enforcement action. A governor cannot block immigration and customs enforcement deportations carried out under federal statute. Federal authority in these areas come directly from what's called the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution. It means the federal law is supreme over what the governor says and what the state law is. State consent for federal law enforcement is not required. So when a governor says we don't need any further help from the federal government, that's all political. There's nothing legal in that. Nothing. Now, a governor can refuse cooperation, but it can't interfere. A governor can say, we decline to assist federal agents. They can do that. I don't like it, but they can. They can withdraw all state resources. Not against the Constitution. They can instruct state agencies you're not to participate. A governor can do that. But a governor cannot obstruct any federal officers, cannot threaten force to stop federal investigations, use state military assets to interfere with federal law enforcement, cannot do that. And the moment the governor crosses this line from non-cooperation to interference, they've just violated the Constitution and put us on the edge of a constitutional crisis or civil war. Using the National Guard as a warning is the brightest red line you can find, because there is no authority in the Constitution. In fact, the Constitution talks specifically about this and what he's trying to do. I've issued a warning to prepare Minnesota National Guard, prepared to be deployed if necessary. Once the governor said that, everything has to change. The Minnesota Guard, the National Guard, is a state force under the governor, unless it's been federalized. but it cannot ever be used to obstruct federal officers. The reason why Trump could call on the National Guard in California is because he was using them to protect federal officers. It can be nationalized by the president if the state cannot protect the federal investigations or federal officers. That's the only way he can just take control and say, nope, I'm calling up the National Guard and they're under my orders now and they have nothing to do with the governor. He can call it up and nationalize them to protect federal officers carrying out federal law. That's the only way it can happen. That's why Donald Trump, they could cry a river that he was violating the Constitution, but he wasn't. That's why they lost every time in court, because that's the Constitution. That's what the National Guard is allowed to do, protect federal officers. Here's what they can't do. They can't obstruct federal officers. They can't enforce state political objections against the federal law. They cannot deploy or be threatened to deploy against DOJ, DHS, or ICE, because that violates the Supremacy Clause. Also, posse comitatus. If they are deployed as police officers, if they are deployed to go against federal law enforcement, posse comitatus comes in. Also, federal criminal charges come in of obstruction of justice. So it's not an issue of state rights. Once he says, I'm threatening to use the National Guard, that's constitutional defiance. Now, what does the federal government, what should our response be from the federal government? Federal authority continues anyway. It doesn't matter what the state does. Investigations and deportations need to proceed, no matter what the governor says. Okay, whatever. Federalization of the Guard does become an option. I don't like it, but it has to, if it has to be done, then it has to be done. The president can do it, stripping the governor of command if he's threatening to use it illegally or not protecting the federal officers. The third thing that we have an option is obstruction consequences. Federal injunctions, contempt of court, criminal exposure for obstruction. This all has precedent, and it should be considered. Now, here's what Walz is actually doing. He's not going to call up the National Guard and do that because he knows he'll go to jail. And he's trying to avoid going to jail. That's why he and the mayor are doing this, because of all of the corruption in Minnesota. This has nothing to do. Do you think they're doing this because they're protecting the Somali citizens? That's what they're saying. But they have been involving Somali citizens knowingly in deep corruption. And they also know I can never be elected here if I don't look strong on the Somalis. If we don't change the flag in Minnesota to look like the Somalian flag, I can't be governor anymore. Okay? What he's actually calling up is not the National Guard. He is calling up the Democratic National Guard. He is calling up he is calling on people like Nicole Renee Good. He is trying to get people who are so zombie-like on the Democratic side to go up and put their bodies in and to obstruct. He's using them as soldiers. That's not just unconstitutional on the National Guard side. That is just morally reprehensible. More in a minute. Sorry, I reversed her name. It's Renee Nicole Good, by the way.